the winds blow? Can you hear the waves crash? Help us now, help us now. Okay, so I doubt that the disciples knew prayer. But my fanciful version of that children's song reflects pretty well, I think, the way they were feeling out there on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples were probably already in a pretty anxious state when they left shore that day. Jesus had instructed them to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And the other side, of course, was Gentile territory, the territory of the Gerasenes. Now, Jews were to avoid contact with Gentiles in so much as possible, and I don't suppose Gentiles were particularly interested in hanging out with Jews either. So Jesus had sent the disciples on a difficult mission to start with. And then he falls asleep on them. Goodness knows he must have been tired. He had been preaching and teaching to large crowds of people. I know that I can be tired after preaching to a fairly small group in a fairly limited time on a Sunday morning. And those of you who are or have been teachers know how exhausted you can be at the end of the day. Jesus was tired, and he fell asleep. The most natural thing in the world. The disciples seemed content not to bother him. Not that is, until that storm appeared out of nowhere and threatened to cast them all into the sea. Now, the Sea of Galilee was notorious for its unpredictable weather. Even those who made their livelihoods on it, who must have studied the skies and whatever other signs nature offered, were sometimes taken by surprise by sudden storms. And these storms were dangerous, even for experienced fishermen. So when the winds start to blow and the waves begin to swamp the boat, it's all hands on deck. But there's Jesus, still sleeping peacefully in the stern with his head on a cushion. Don't we love that detail? That's when the disciples wake Jesus up. Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? I wonder what they expected Jesus to do. Did they expect him to help bail? Take a turn at the oars? I rather doubt that they expected what they actually got. We know what that was. Jesus actually calming the storm. I doubt they expected that because what had happened, their response was not relief, but fear. Who is this? Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who is this? That was a good question, wasn't it? Up until this time, the disciples had known Jesus as their teacher and as a gifted healer. Clearly, God's Spirit was at work in him, working through him. But he was very much a human being. He ate, he slept, he got tired. But here he was, doing what only God could do. As I'm reading from Job, it's clear, doing what only God can do, commanding nature, bringing the watery chaos into order, just as God did at the beginning of creation. Who is this? The categories of divine and human were suddenly confused. Now, the disciples knew who God was. They surely knew Psalm 121 with its comforting promise. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Well, that rules out Jesus. Just a minute ago, he had been fast asleep, his head cradled in a cushion. Now he is assuming the role of God. How can this be? And who is this indeed? This is a story of the incarnation, of the divine in human form. This is a story of the nature of Christ, fully human and fully divine. This is a story that changed everything. No wonder the disciples were confused and afraid. Now, for those of us who study the nature of Christ in confirmation class and aren't shocked by all this could be a comforting story, can't it? The Jesus who is in the boat with us in the midst of the storms is also the one who calms the storms. That same Jesus who, as a human being, understands our troubles and our fears as God, has power over them. It's a comforting story. And we have all felt at some point, I suspect, that peace that Jesus offers even in the midst of storms, perhaps even in this strange pandemic year. When we are sick or grieving or worried about loved ones or isolated or anxious or alone, when relationships or jobs disappear, we can know, even in the midst of the stress, the peace that Jesus offers. And yet, I suspect that sometimes we still feel as if Jesus is asleep on us. Sometimes we still might feel as if we have to call on Jesus to wake up. Things are falling apart here, Jesus, and it's not just in my life. It's the world around me. Everywhere I stand, the rug seems to be pulled out from under me. The institutions that have made me feel safe, from family to church to democracy itself, are proving not to be so solid as I thought they were. The history that I learned in school turns out to be only half the story, and even that half is colored by the perspective of those in power. My own experiences can no longer be the only filter I use to see the world. And if I remove that filter, what happens then? Even the stability of the planet is in question. What kind of world will my grandchildren inherit? The storms are raging, Jesus, and what are you doing about it? Wake up! Can't you see that we are perishing? Goodness knows there is much to fear in our world. The storm that the disciples encountered in the Sea of Galilee was real. And so are the many kinds of storms in our world right now. So what is Jesus doing about it? Well, we could say, of course, that Jesus works through us. That Jesus is depending on us to tackle these storms. And in many ways, that's true. We are Jesus' hands and feet in the world. We do bear responsibility for doing Christ's work of reconciliation and mercy and healing and peace. And we do turn to Jesus to give us strength and wisdom in that struggle. But that's not the whole story, is it? Consider the disciples. They were surely doing their part. They were rowing and sailing as fast as they could. But they still needed help beyond themselves. Don't we? Here's where it might help to look at the larger picture. The story in Mark's Gospel is told in the midst of Jesus' teachings about the kingdom of God, that cosmic and eternal kingdom in which God's will completely be done, and God's love will prevail in all things. Jesus calming the storm is a sign of his power in this cosmic kingdom. This kingdom that we may experience only dimly in this world, but this kingdom in which God is fully in charge. Evil and chaos are exercised, and all will indeed be well. That kingdom is hard for us to grasp. And it's sometimes hard for us to believe it when it seems to us that Jesus is asleep on the job. But as one of the commentators on this passage says, this story is a reminder that reigning over all fearsome things is a God who is mightier than they are. over all fearsome things is a God who is mightier than they are. Someday, all creation will be renewed. Justice and mercy will reign. Ultimately, Christ's word of peace in the storm will be the reality of all creation. This is the vision that keeps us going, isn't it? This is the vision that allows us to put our fears aside and open our hearts to what new things Jesus might be up to. This is the vision that keeps us grounded even when things seem to be falling apart. Because who knows, what looks like chaos to us may be the beginning of something new and beautiful that only God can see. Now that, I suppose, should be the end of the sermon. But I have to add a postscript. I'd like just to point out the disciples' boat was not the only one on the water that day. Did you notice that? Mark says the disciples took him with them in the boat. Other boats were with them. Isn't that interesting? Who was in those other boats? Was it members of the same party, other followers of Jesus? Or was it just other fishermen hoping for a good day's catch? Mark doesn't say. But what we can be pretty sure of is that when Jesus calms the storm, it's not just the disciples' boat that's saved. It's all the boats on the water that day, right? The calming of the storm wasn't just in this little corner. It was for the sea. That's how we recognize the work of the cosmic Christ, when all boats are rescued. Not even just the ones that call on Jesus, but those who are out there on the water for whatever reason. All those were caught in the storm. The work of the cosmic Christ will benefit everyone. If it doesn't, I suspect it's not the work of Christ. So whatever seas we're navigating today, whatever crises loom on the horizon, do not fear. Jesus is with us in the boat of faith, bringing comfort and help and peace in the moment. And the risen Christ rules over all the cosmos. We're in God's time.